I don't have to tell you that things are bad. Everybody knows things are bad. It's a depression. Everybody's out of work or scared of losing their job. The dollar buys a nickel's worth. Banks are going bust. Shopkeepers keep a gun under the counter. Punks are running wild in the street. And there's nobody anywhere who seems to know what to do. And there's no end to it. The air is unfit to breathe, and our food is unfit to eat. And we sit watching our TVs while some local newscaster tells us that today we have 15 homicides and 63 violent crimes, as if that's the way it's supposed to be. We know that things are bad, worse than bad. They're crazy. It's like everything everywhere is going crazy. So we don't go out anymore. We sit in the house, and slowly the world we're living in is getting smaller. And all we say is, please at least leave us alone in our living rooms. Let me have my toaster and my TV and my steel belted radios, and I won't say anything. Just leave us alone. Well, I'm not going to leave you alone. I want you to get mad. I don't want you to protest. I don't want you to riot. I don't want you to write your congressman because I wouldn't know what to tell you to write. I don't know what to do about the depression and the inflation and the Russians and the crime in the street. All I know is that first you got to get mad. You got to say, I'm a human being, goddammit. My life has value. So I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now. Go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, I'm mad as hell and not going to take this anymore. I want you to get up right now, sit up, go to your windows, open them, and stick your head out and yell, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. Things have got to change, but first you got to get mad. You got to say, I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. Then we'll figure out what to do about the depression and the inflation and the oil crisis. But first, get up out of your chairs, open the window, stick your head out, and yell and say it. I'm mad as hell, I'm not going to take this anymore. That's the famous Howard Beale quote from the movie Network. It came out in 1976. Here are some other historical events from 1976. Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne founded Apple Computer in the garage of Jobs' parents' house in Cupertino, California. The Apple One went on sale in July 1976 at a price of $666.66. Wozniak later said he had no idea about the relation between the number and the number of the beast, and that he came up with the price because he liked repeating digits, and because it was a one-third markup on the $500 wholesale price. Jimmy Carter ran for president and won in 1976. He was the only presidential candidate to openly talk of a UFO sighting during an election campaign. The incident took place one evening in 1969, 2 years before he became governor of Georgia. Carter was preparing to give a speech at a Lions Club meeting. He reported that at about 7:15 p.m., one of the guests called his attention to a strange bright white object about as bright as the moon that was about 30 degrees above the horizon to the west of where they were standing. It moved toward their direction, but stopped beyond a stand of pine trees some distance from them. The object then changed color, first to blue, then to red, then back to white, before appearing to recede into the distance. During his 1976 election campaign, he is said to have told reporters that, as a result of it, he would institute a policy of openness. If he were elected to office, saying, one thing's for sure, I'll never make fun of people who say they have seen unidentified objects in the sky. If I become president, I'll make every piece of information this country has about UFO sightings available to the public and the scientists. Despite his earlier pledge, once elected, Carter distanced himself from disclosure, citing defense implications as being behind his decision. The movie Network still describes what is going on today: depression, unemployment, inflation, poor food, crime, homicides. We sit in the house on social media or playing video games. Network is a reflection of how do you live your life when you live in a society that doesn't value life. Today's news plays off that by either dividing us or uniting us when it suits them. News is information about current events. The English news developed in the 14th century as a special use of the plural form of new. News typically connotes the presentation of new information. The newness of news gives it an uncertain quality which distinguishes it from the more careful investigations of history. People used to reflect and discuss important news. You acquire knowledge from information that you didn't know. This isn't the case anymore. The media post stories that manipulate the public. They feed off negative emotions. These are so-called fast food stories. Keep the public ignorant of true knowledge of what is really happening in the world, which is relevant. In the past, those who controlled the media determined what was newsworthy. Now, with the internet and social media, the public can also determine what makes news or goes viral. People used to read, books were popular, newspapers were the main means of receiving news. Things changed with the invention of the radio and then the television. It got worse with the internet. Now no one reads. We're going backwards like when we had town criers. They were used also because many people were illiterate. They announced government news or any proclamations. This was the same all over the world, in Asia, Africa, Europe, etc. They would use bells, horns, and drums as means to grab the attention of the people. But even back then, people listened and used common sense because it was a matter of life and death. Today, with television and social media, everything is visual. Seeing is believing. People record with their phones for evidence before anything else. Imagine where today's religion would be if we use today's standards with the past. All the so called past divine inspired testimony that people read and recite at places of worship will go out the window. People would demand visual proof. Seeing is believing. Things changed when we became a visual society. We no longer learn through patience and experience. It's instant gratification. Self control is a thing of the past. Everything is ours with a click of our fingertip. This happened with news, especially cable news, when it burst on the scene in the 1980s. 24/7 news took over, and with that, ratings over integrity. This was ever so true with the abolition of the Fairness Doctrine in August of 1987. The Fairness Doctrine was introduced in 1949 by the Federal Communications Commission. It was a policy that required that holders of broadcast licenses to present both controversial issues of public importance and to do so in a manner that fairly reflected different viewpoints. The novel 1984 was published in 1949. George Orwell wrote 1984 to warn people about the negative things that could happen if they allowed their government to exercise total control. It's safe to say that people didn't read the book or pay attention to his warning. On Monday, October 19th, 1987, a few months after the Fairness Doctrine was repealed, Black Monday occurred. It was the global, severe, and largely unexpected stock market crash. Worldwide losses were estimated at 1.71 trillion. The severity of the crash sparked fears of extended economic instability or even a reprise of the Great Depression. Later in December of that year, the movie Wall Street is released. It inspired this famous speech about greed by the main antagonist, Gordon Gekko. The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for the lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right, greed works, greed clarifies, cuts through, and captures the essence of the evolutionary spirit. Greed in all of its forms of greed, for life, for money, for love, knowledge, has marked the upward surge of mankind. And greed, you mark my words, will not only save Telder paper, but that other malfunctioning corporation called the USA. We have speeches from the movies Network and Wall Street describing the 70s and 80s, which seem to still be going on today. Some may say times are worse. With the repeal of the Fairness Doctrine, now the media can be openly biased. The journalist is now a controlled figurehead, especially the newscaster. They have become actors who read off scripts of their masters, and at times they read off the same script. This is how I discovered they are controlled by the same people, and I will prove it. It is said that around 90% of the media is controlled by 6 corporations. They control us by keeping us divided within the country and united outside the country. They do this by taking advantage of people's ignorance, playing into people's fears. Policies are not passed on people being informed, they are passed on people being afraid and ill-informed. You ever notice that the most important people on the news are the sports anchor and the weather person? They're put on last for a reason. People care more about sports and the weather because it really affects their day. We live in a society that holds athletes more accountable than our leaders. Men and women 18 to 35 years old get blamed more than men and women 40 to 80 years old. Coaches get fired, athletes cut or traded for not winning and ruining billion-dollar franchises, while businessmen and politicians get more money, tax breaks, and reelected for ruining countries worth trillions of dollars. Let that sink in. That's why politicians and businessmen love sports. It keeps people distracted from what they're really doing. Imagine the fall of the Roman Empire happening and the Roman people only concerned with what's happening with gladiators at the Colosseum. The famous Roman poet Juvenal said, "Giving them bread and circuses, and they will never revolt." The news keeps us divided and distracted by keeping our attention on useless and meaningless people and things. But the main two that they lean on are politics and race. They are even more profound when it's time to elect a president. Every 4 years, politics and race reach their crescendo. Say it with me. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Both politics and race involve blame and no change. Why? Because if there were change, all involved would be out of jobs. Race is where I discovered the open secret of the news. It's used to control and divide. And by using critical thinking, I see their formula. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. I notice that every newscaster in America mentions race in a story, especially when the people are black or white. They make it a divisive issue. I also noticed that these same newscasters, when covering incidents outside of America, never mention race when American citizens or servicemen are involved. They make sure to say Americans. I have yet to catch a newscaster slip. If a person in the military dies overseas, it's not a black, white, Latino, Asian American soldier, it's just an American soldier. The commentary is different. We're supposed to be divided within the United States of America and united outside. People who travel or expatriates who live outside the United States can attest to this. You feel more American outside America than inside America. You actually know your fellow American neighbors more overseas than within America. You're not afraid of them. It's actually quite sad. There's also a deeper reason behind this. The government does this so you don't question what they do outside the country. Stay ignorant outside the country on foreign policy, hate who we tell you to hate. Does that sound familiar? It should. It's the same policy inside of America. Hate who we tell you to hate. It's never think for yourself. Use your own free will to do your own research and come to your own properly informed conclusion. The media is basically told on itself by doing this. I challenge you to look for this the next time the media brings up race and when they talk about American service people or Americans overseas. The media is the most powerful entity on earth. They have the power to make the innocent guilty and to make the guilty innocent. And that's power because they control the minds of the masses. Do you agree or disagree? Maybe you discovered something else. Let me know in the comments below. Subscribe and share if you enjoy the content.